So, imagine this. You wake up one morning and the door to a country you might have been planning to visit, work in, or even move to is just suddenly slammed shut. Well, for people in dozens of countries, that's pretty much what happened when the United States hit the brakes on visas, creating a huge ripple effect across the entire globe. Here's the headline that dropped. The US government just stopped, completely halted all visa processing for more than 75 countries. Now, this wasn't just some minor policy change. No, this was a full-on global visa freeze that really caught the world off guard. And the scale of this thing was just massive. We're not talking about a handful of places. The list of affected countries stretched across continents, hitting major nations like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Russia, and Iran. From Asia to Africa and Eastern Europe, this thing was truly global. Okay, so that's the what. But the big question is, why? What was the official reason for a move this drastic? Well, it all comes down to a core idea the administration pointed to, something called the financial self-sufficiency rule. The argument they laid out was pretty direct. They said that anyone coming to the United States needs to be able to support themselves financially. The whole point was to make sure new arrivals didn't become a drain on American taxpayers. To really get that, we need to be clear on what they meant by financial burden. They were specifically talking about welfare schemes, government help like food aid or housing assistance. These programs are paid for by taxpayer money and are meant for citizens. So the main idea here was really about protection. The policy was framed as a way to kind of shield taxpayer-funded benefits, to keep them for American citizens, and stop what the administration described as an exploitation of the system. Now, this wasn't just some abstract idea. The administration actually came with receipts. They released data, a list really, that they claimed showed exactly which immigrant groups were using these welfare systems the most. And that list became the foundation for the whole decision. So, who was at the top of this list? Well, according to the data they released, immigrants from Bhutan, Yemen, and Somalia had the highest rates of households getting government assistance. They were ranked 1, 2, and 3. And the data got even more specific when you look at some of the bigger countries. For folks from Bangladesh, the report said that a whopping 55% of households were using welfare. For Pakistan, the number was around 40%. The official conclusion was pretty blunt. A big chunk of these populations were not, in their words, financially self-sufficient. But here's where the whole story gets really interesting. A huge country right in the same region, India, was completely missing from this list. Immigrants from India weren't flagged for high welfare use at all. And that creates a really important contrast. And that brings us to a much more complicated picture. It's almost like a tale of two totally different immigrant experiences. The data tells one side of the story, but what's happening on the ground, especially for groups that weren't on that list, shows a whole different set of challenges. I mean, just look at this contrast. On one hand, you have the government's data zeroing in on certain groups for high welfare use. But at the exact same time, you have groups like Indian immigrants, who our source describes as overachievers. In fact, they're one of the highest earning groups in the entire country. So that raises a really important question, one that our source material dives right into. If a group is doing really well economically, contributing a ton, why do they still run into social friction and negativity? It totally challenges that simple idea that financial success just automatically means you'll be welcomed with open arms. And what the source suggests is pretty counterintuitive. The hostility wasn't because of poor economic performance, it was because of high performance. The narrative flipped to things like accusations of nepotism, claims that they were overachieving and snatching up all the top jobs, and they even faced targeted negative campaigns online. So when you put all of this together, it starts to point to a potentially huge shift in the whole philosophy of American immigration. You have to ask, what does the new welcome mat in America actually look like? What seems to be emerging is a kind of two-tiered system. On one side, you're restricting access for people from countries with high reported welfare use. But on the other side, you're rolling out the red carpet with new programs designed specifically to bring in wealthy individuals. A perfect example of this is a program people have started calling the Golden Visa. The idea is pretty simple. If you make a huge financial investment in the country, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars here, you can get residency in return. It's a crystal clear signal that the U.S. is looking for immigrants who bring capital with them.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty powerful question to think about. When you combine these policies, blocking access based on welfare data while actively recruiting the rich, does it signal a real change? Is the United States shifting its whole identity from a land of opportunity for everyone to more of a marketplace that's really just for the wealthy?